All right, let's get right into it. Think about it. In the bright, noisy theater of modern life, we are all performers, aren't we? But what happens when the applause stops? The lights go down, and we're left alone with whatever's lurking behind the curtain. Well, today, we're exploring that very question. What happens when we come face to face with our own inner darkness?
Now, this isn't just some fancy poetry. From a psychological standpoint, this is a pretty haunting diagnosis of the modern individual. A person just filled with these chaotic, conflicting impulses, who, in trying to build a path for themselves, literally collapses under their own internal pressure. This is the story of a man who met his shadow and was completely consumed by it.
And that really brings us to the core problem, doesn't it? The old stories, the ancient myths, they were like maps for navigating the really treacherous landscapes of our own minds. They gave us symbols for the dragons we all carry inside. But now, in a world that's pretty much thrown those maps away, what are we supposed to do? How do we find the courage to face all that chaos alone?
You see, this new reality has kind of thrust us into what you could call the age of the hero. But forget about capes and superpowers. Psychologically, this is about the terrifying responsibility of having to forge your own meaning in a world that has no guardrails. It's an age that demands we take a hard look behind the masks we all wear. Let's just unpack this psychological role of myths for a second. These weren't just bedtime stories. They were sophisticated technologies for the human mind. They gave us a symbolic language to process things like suffering and death. And without them, we're left in this psychological vacuum. And what rushes in to fill that vacuum? These false idols, these simplistic political ideologies that promise meaning but really just demand conformity. And they stop us from doing the real, difficult internal work of becoming an individual. So, to really understand this struggle, we're going to look at two archetypal figures. Think of them as representing two different paths you can take in this age of the hero. They both wear masks, but their stories take dramatically different turns when those masks start to crack. On one side, you have the performer. He is absolutely terrified of the chaotic truth of suffering that lies just beneath his perfectly polished stage. On the other side, you have the pale criminal, a man who acts on his chaotic impulse but then falls right into the abyss of his own guilt. Now, the crucial point here is that they're both hiding. The performer uses a beautiful mask of success. The criminal uses a shabby mask of justification. But both are avoiding their true, untamed selves. So let's really define this golden mask. Psychologically, it's a brilliant defense mechanism. It's our persona, right? Our curated self built on order, reason, and perfection, what Nietzsche would call Apollonian. But its entire purpose is to wall off the Dionysian, the messy, the chaotic, the passionate, and often the painful truth of what it actually means to be human. It's a beautiful lie we tell ourselves just to feel safe. And this just illustrates it perfectly. The pale criminal wore a mask too. Sure, it wasn't as shiny as the performer's, but it did the exact same job. He told himself, and he told the world, that he killed for money. But this was just a poor reason, a convenient little story to hide a much, much more terrifying truth about his own nature, a truth his conscious mind just couldn't bear to look at. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter how strong, how beautiful, or how well-reasoned it is. Every mask eventually cracks. And this is the moment of crisis, when our carefully constructed reality shatters and we are forced to look right into the mirror of the abyss. For the performer, it all begins with silence. The music stops, the distractions fade away, the audience is gone. There's nothing left but him and the vast, quiet emptiness he spent his entire life running from. This is where his internal collapse begins. And in that silence, that beautiful lie, the persona, it just can't hold up anymore. All the perfection, all the control, it just crumbles and falls away, exposing the raw, vulnerable self that was hiding underneath it all. And what does he find beneath the mask? The ugliest man. This is the psychological shadow brought to life. It's the personification of every single flaw, every shame, every insecurity, and every dark impulse he ever pushed down. It's everything he believed made him unlovable and monstrous. This is his moment of truth. Now let's contrast that with the pale criminal. His mask didn't crack in silence. It was completely obliterated by the act itself. That raw Dionysian impulse, this thirst for the happiness of the knife, it just erupted and overpowered his conscious rationalizing mind. He saw his own shadow, not in quiet reflection, but in a horrifying flash of violence, and the sight of it just broke him. And right here is the critical difference. At the very edge of the abyss, the performer makes a conscious choice. He stands still. he doesn't run. And that choice is the beginning of healing, of integrating that shadow into a new, stronger self. The pale criminal, though, he makes no choice. He is simply shattered by the revelation, and he becomes a ghost, a pale spectator, haunted by an act he can't even comprehend or carry. So if we want to avoid the fate of the pale criminal, how do we follow the performer's path? Well, this brings us to the solution, a process we can think of as a kind of psychological alchemy, of transforming the lead of our suffering into the gold of self-mastery.
This four-step dance is basically the psychological blueprint for integration. First, you stand still. You stop running, you stop distracting yourself, and you simply face the chaos. Second, you invite the shadow in. This means you have to acknowledge the ugliest man not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as a lost part of yourself. Third is the mystical marriage. This is the conscious act of integrating that chaos with your ordered, rational self. And finally, from that union, you find the wild lilies, the surprising strength, creativity, and beauty that can only grow from the dark soil of your deepest pain.
You know, the ultimate goal of this entire process is to achieve a state of amor fati, the love of your fate. And this isn't just passive acceptance. It's an active, joyful affirmation of your entire existence, the good, the bad, the light, and the shadow. It's looking at the complete story of your life, scars and all, and having the strength to say, yes, I would live it all again. And this really is the core takeaway. True psychological resilience isn't about building higher walls or stronger masks to keep the darkness out. It's a kind of alchemy. It's about having the courage to metabolize your own poison, to transform the very thing that could destroy you into the source of your greatest strength and creativity. So the pale criminal's ultimate failure wasn't the crime itself. It was his psychological inability to bear its weight. He lacked what Nietzsche calls the holy yea, that profound strength of will to affirm his own nature, consequences, and all. You see, he said no to the law, but he couldn't say a deep, resounding yes to himself. And that is what turned him pale. This brings us to our final and maybe most crucial point. To truly be free in this modern age, we have to move beyond society's flawed idea of justice and learn to become our own, more honest judges. Society's justice is often just a form of legal revenge, right? The judges who condemn the criminal are, in a way, just as sick. They project their own unacknowledged darkness onto him to feel better about their own goodness. They're punishing the branch, but totally ignoring the roots of the tree. The hero's justice is the exact opposite. It is radical personal responsibility. It's about integrating your own shadow, nurturing your whole self, and refusing to hide from the mirror of your own soul. And this is the final challenge. You know, it's easy to be a rebel, to break the old rules and tear down old values. Anyone can do that. The true test of a hero is what comes next. Can you stand in the silence that follows? Do you have the strength to create new values from within yourself, to impose your own order on the chaos? That is true mastery. So I'll leave you with this question. We all have a shadow. We all perform deeds, both good and bad, that cast that shadow. And the choice before each of us is this. Will you be haunted by that shadow, a pale reflection of your own life, just like the criminal? Or will you do the hard, alchemical work of becoming a light so bright that it consumes the darkness, integrating it into a stronger, more complete whole?